Welcome to This Week in Wrestling History.
All right, everyone, welcome to episode 4 of This Week in Wrestling History. I'm Ryan.
I'm Jacob.
And we are here with the week of August 22nd through August 28th. So this week we're actually going to just cover SummerSlam 1991. Again, doing things a little bit different this time around.
Yeah, just going to try something a little different. Instead of us just running through a few things, we're actually going to talk about one thing that we actually haven't talked a whole lot about before this.
Yeah, so normally how the show's been working is we'll kind of assign ourselves some homework. We'll each pick a couple things to go over. We would individually watch them, kind of come back and review them on the air. This time what we did is we both watched the same show, and we're going to go a little bit more in-depth on just that one show. So if you like it, let us know. If you hate it, let us know.
Yeah, well, like we've said before, give us some feedback because we can always kind of change up how we've been doing things and kind of stick to one of the last 3 now formats that we've done.
Right. Before we actually get into the show, we're one day removed from SummerSlam of this year, so I think we'll touch on that just super quick since, modern day is not the format of the show, but we should still talk about it.
Technically, it is history because it happened yesterday.
Ooh, fact. Anyways, yeah. SummerSlam was yesterday. Since we're recording on a Monday, NXT TakeOver was the day before that. What was your take on the show?
TakeOver was by far the best thing that WWE has put out in recent memory.
Yeah. Sadly, that's about par for the course now.
SummerSlam was closer than other events have been following takeovers.
SummerSlam was a step in the right direction for the company, no doubt.
TakeOver, however, was, like I said, that when you get an opening match as strong as Undisputed Era versus Mustache Mountain, like there's no way that another show would be able to top it.
Nothing on SummerSlam really could hold a candle to that match. It was ridiculously good.
The closest thing you had was Seth and Dolph for the IC belt, but even then, that wasn't as good as their past matches.
Right, that wasn't even the best of their matches, and I think that's something that we touched on last week a bit, where they've been giving away Seth and Dolph on TV for weeks now. And now that SummerSlam comes around, you don't even have their best match because they've been giving it away.
Right. It's like Edge on his podcast talked about a couple weeks ago when he was talking about Nakamura and Jeff Hardy. That should have been the first time that we saw them facing each other was for the U.S. belt at a pay-per-view.
Right. And
not multiple times as a throwaway 5-minute match on SmackDown or on Raw.
Right. The coolest thing, I think, of the Seth-Dolph match was Seth's combination superplex into Falcon Arrow. This time he did it reverse. It was a reverse suplex into basically the 1916.
Yeah, just a reversed Falcon Arrow, which he didn't get the full lift on.
Right, pretty much. It was neat, but that little spot was really the most innovative thing they did in that match.
And we've also seen it how many times on Raw?
Exactly.
We also had Charlotte winning her now 7th.
Yep,
7th title since coming into the main roster.
Yep.
She beat Carmella and Becky Lynch.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said last week, I'm going to lose my mind for a second here.
All right.
Becky should have won that match. New York even said after the match that she deserved it and she should have won that match.
Right. So when you have the crowd cheering the quote-unquote heel turn, you did something wrong. Yes, New York City is kind of an odd place, especially the Barclays Center, especially the night after a takeover. It's a slightly smarter crowd, and they have different opinions than the general crowd, but again, going back to what we were saying last week with a problem of making the WWE Universe a thing, when it becomes a life unto itself and you can't control it like you normally can,
you get stuff like this happening.
Right. You're going to have an audience now on TV where they may not be giving the reactions you want.
Right. A heel turn still to this day should be something that's booed.
Yeah.
No matter who the character is, no matter if they're an indie darling or not, it should be booed.
Yeah.
They should not be jumping out of their chairs excited that Becky Lynch just tossed Charlotte over the announcer's table.
Right. I mean, we've seen it. You had Ciampa was an internet darling in NXT. He's the biggest heel. He's the most pure heel the company has. You can be a heel still today.
Yeah.
It can be done.
After that, we had, what was the next big one? Ronda beating Alexa for the title, getting her first taste of gold in WWE.
Yep. Personally, I think it was a little too early to pull the trigger on Ronda. It was a little weird how she kept calling all of her spots in the ring. I mean, it was intentionally that she was calling out to the crowd, kind of playing it, but that's not how it read to me.
No, it read more, or it almost felt like it was something that she was trying to call the match instead of the ref or Alexa calling it. And she just happened to do it at a louder volume, so they played it into the story.
To me, it felt more like she doesn't know how to pull some of those judo throws. And it was more like, heads up, Alexa, this is about to hurt, but trying to do it in a way that looked like she was just taunting her.
Yeah. I don't know. I like having the belt on her. However,
I'm not against putting the belt on Ronda. I think it was just too early. I think there was other story. I feel like the stories could have been told better. Ronda, she seems like a weird tweener right now. She didn't really come off like the face.
right.
Like, she was taunting Alexa a little bit too much. She's almost too known of a quantity, and they haven't really done anything original with her.
Yeah.
Yet.
I could see that.
She's not a character. She's still Ronda Rousey of the UFC fame. She's not Ronda Rousey WWE entertainer.
I could see that.
So
My biggest gripe with it is that why would you make her first title win at a SummerSlam, and why wouldn't you save it for a WrestleMania thing?
Yes and no. I mean, it makes SummerSlam feel like a big show as well, which it's supposed to be a big show.
It is, but going back to having a takeover that does that well beforehand, it takes away the value of the
does a little bit.
SummerSlam.
I mean, instead of SummerSlam being kind of like the end of your holdover programs, it can be the start of your leading into Royal Rumble season. Like, it's what can start and take you through the winter and the fall.
The pre-road to WrestleMania.
Right. All right. And then last thing we're going to touch on real quick was just the Universal title.
Yeah, because that finally got pulled off of that holdout Brock.
It's done. Okay. It's done. It's over. Good. Let's just move on to the next thing. Was it what everyone wanted? No. But it was something. It's moving on.
It's true. The thing that apparently a lot of people have caught on to it, but I don't know if the average watcher caught on to it, was how WWE technically tricked the crowd into cheering during the Roman match, even though they weren't cheering for Roman.
Yeah. They were cheering Braun's involvement.
So Braun comes out, hey, I like to do things face to face. I'm going to be waiting for whoever wins the belt. Brock and Roman have their match. They dispose of Braun not very early.
I mean, it was a short match anyways. So.
Yeah. And immediately after, Roman wins, holds up the belt. The crowd is still cheering because, yay, they think that Braun's going to cash in. We're going to take it off of Roman. And then pay-per-view ends.
Yeah, it was odd.
They done got us.
Yeah, they done did. So, like I said, overall, one of their better pay-per-views. Not great in the grand scheme of things, but better for this year at least.
Significantly better for this year.
Hopefully a sign of a turn in a better direction.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so let us go ahead and get on to the main event here, and let's get to SummerSlam 1991.
Let's do it.
August 26, 1991.
SummerSlam 91. This is where we're going to actually start talking about the main part of the podcast this time around. Overall, a big card.
Yeah, it was real cool. It was like the end of your rock and roll connection era wrestling, a little bit before we hit like the super cartoony, over the top characters of the early 90s.
Yeah, none of the career guys just yet. There
Yeah,
might be one or two popping up, but they haven't full blown invaded.
Yeah,
yet.
it's your characters are still a little bit more three-dimensional. It's no longer, it's not yet just the zany one-dimensional things.
Right. So, like we said, kind of a stacked card. 'Cause
Yeah.
right off the bat, you have a 6-man tag match with the Dragon.
Not Ricky Steamboat,
Don't call him that. The British Bulldog.
not Davey Boy Smith,
You can't call him that either. And the Texas Tornado.
not Kerry Von Erich.
Nope, not the same people. And then they're facing Hercules, Paul Roma, and Warlord, managed by Slick.
Yeah, they're kind of your generic, bigger, stronger mid-card heel teams. All managed by Slick. Normally, Paul Roma and Hercules were a tag team of Power and Glory. Warlord was just kind of a solo guy. They were fine.
Yeah, I don't even really think there was much story to any of this other than the bad guys versus the good guys.
Yeah, it was not a whole lot to it. I mean, honestly, pretty basic heel versus face stuff. One thing I noticed, their first time Warlord got in the ring against Davey Boy Smith, there was a huge pop because Davey Boy was very, very strong, and it took a number of clotheslines to finally take Warlord off his feet. But when they did, the crowd went nuts.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising how they got such a reaction off of just a setup of clotheslines.
Right, and I mean that was kind of typical for back in the day, though, when like your heels were awful and people loved when they got comeuppance on anything, even if it was just the big guy getting taken off of his feet. And I mean, a lesson there for big guys in today's era, where it's okay to leave your feet, but make them work for it. Don't just sell anything.
Right. Make it so that it's a little bit less often and a little bit more special when somebody does finally end up knocking you down.
Right. Some other things about this, and it was something that I could kind of continue to notice through the night. So the commentary team was Gorilla Monsoon, Bobby Heenan, and Roddy Piper.
Ugh.
Piper wasn't the best, but he did a couple things that I really appreciated. So at one point during this match, the faces are in peril and the heels are trying to cheat a bit, but one of the faces wants to come in and stop the double team, but the ref catches the face coming in and stops him. So while the ref's back's turned, more heel shenanigans.
Yep, as usual.
But Piper's commentary on it was that the ref's distraction was orchestrated by our heel team, keeping the heat on the heels, not on dumb ref not doing his job.
Yeah, and he had done that a couple of times throughout the rest of the pay-per-view. He had brought a little more attention to some things that was a little bit better.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he's prone to over-exaggeration and whatnot here and there, but
That was my issue with it. When
he was a little bit too much at times.
Kerry Von Erich throws a single punch. I'm sorry, not Kerry Von Erich, the Texas Tornado.
We'll get to that in a second.
Throws a single punch, and Piper's like he just hit his finisher on the guy.
Yeah, he really was. He was working for the boys, kind of.
Which I guess isn't a bad thing because Piper was always over the top. And I
Yeah,
guess
it
his
just-
character just went from in the ring to next to the ring.
Yeah, it does just get to be a little bit much at times. So going back to that Kerry Von Erich thing, something I'd noticed was at one point Piper slips up and calls the Dragon Steamboat. And then in like the next 30 seconds, he goes on to reiterate the term the Dragon, the Dragon, the Dragon, like 9 or 10 times in the span of 30 seconds.
I noticed that too. It was over and over and over again.
Yeah, this was the real start of Vince trying to rebrand people into the WWF image. We'll call it WWF right now because that's still what it was back then. He was really trying hard to make it his.
Yeah, he didn't want any kind of acknowledgement to the competition at all.
Yeah.
And this is still kind of when WCW was on the rise.
Oh, this was firmly NWA times.
Yeah, this was as they started to come into their own and started to blossom to become another
a full-blown competitor on a national scale, not just
Right.
a regional thing.
And Vince, even up until more recently, maybe the last 5 years or so, didn't like to acknowledge anybody outside
no,
of
did
the
not
WWE.
acknowledge the competition whatsoever. And so we have Ricky the Dragon Steamboat just being the Dragon, British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith, just the British Bulldog, Texas Tornado Kerry Von Erich, just Texas Tornado, no proper surnames given or anything.
Which to me blows my mind a little bit, because you have a Von Erich in the ring that's wrestling royalty.
You have Ricky Steamboat, who gave one of the best matches ever at your own WrestleMania 3.
Yeah, and you have British Bulldog, who you would later on start calling him Davy Boy when he starts to go with the Hart Foundation a little more.
He had been in the company for a while, because the British Bulldogs with him and I'm blanking on the other guy's name, so everyone can yell at me. That's totally fine. It's not Tyson Kidd. He's definitely not Tyson Kidd. Dynamite Kid.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, sorry, I'm blanking on his name right now. Everyone feel free to yell at me and make fun of me. But yeah, they had been a part of the company for the 80s, so it's not like he was new either, but it was part of Vince's new branding scheme, and we could see it in full effect here. But anyways, it was a fine match. It was a great opener. The crowd was hot for it. So
Yeah, it was a solid match. I mean, it was your stereotypical 6-man tag.
yeah,
Got the crowd warmed up for everything.
right. Nothing
It was-
special, but it was fun. It was fine.
Yeah.
All right, next match was something special.
This was one of the best matches I have ever watched.
It still stands up today. As you could see from SummerSlam that just happened yesterday, you could see that Dolph and Seth were trying to live up to this match.
Yeah, you could tell that they were definitely pulling some inspirations from this match.
Right. So we should probably actually mention it was Bret the Hitman Hart versus Mr. Perfect for the Intercontinental title.
Perfect comes in as the champ, and this is right after Bret is kind of doing a singles thing, but he's in kind of full swing into it.
He had recently, the Hart Foundation split up not quite a year before this, a little less than a year before this, but they had reunited a little bit here and there, but it was pretty firmly Bret now having his singles run.
Yeah, the kind of rejoinings was for like special things.
Yeah,
like
it
oh
was
my gosh, look, they're together again.
A couple one-off things,
Yeah.
not a full-blown reunion.
Kind of like what WWE's been doing with the Shield more recently. They come together and then they disappear and then they come together.
Yeah, they're still single stars, but they'll wrestle together when they need each other.
Right. So, again, probably the best match that I have seen in quite a while.
Yeah, we had talked about this a little bit before, and I will say this again. This is the closest thing I've ever seen to, this is going to sound weird, and so bear with me as I word it out, like a legitimate fight while people were using wrestling holds.
Yeah, so it's, I guess another way you could say it is that it was the most believable thing of two guys facing each other that the allure and the illusion of wrestling would entail.
Yeah, like it pushed your suspension of disbelief that these two weren't actually trying to hurt each other to the max, because it seemed like they were trying to kill each other with some of the hip tosses they were doing.
There was definitely a couple of times, especially when Perfect grabs onto Bret's hair and starts pulling it back once or twice. It seemed like these dudes actually hated each other for a solid minute.
It did not seem like these two were in there to put on a show. They were in there to, they were not cooperating basically, but yet everything you know about professional wrestling shows you that these two guys were working together to put on a hell of a match.
Yeah, there was a couple of times where I was just like, oh, was there something? Like, I had to stop and look it up on the internet to make sure that they didn't have something going on against each other backstage.
Yeah, no, there was no heat between the two. It was just two guys that were masterful at their craft.
Yeah, and it was a really well-worked match. And like we were talking about before, you could see shades of Seth and Dolph from this last SummerSlam in this one, and where they were kind of pulling their inspirations
Right, definitely. And So I will give this match credit for something I was a little bit critical of last week, where there wasn't a whole lot of setup. There wasn't a whole lot of story to these characters. I mean, individually, yes, their characters were fine, but the fight between them wasn't a whole lot more than I have the belt versus I want the belt.
Yeah, I mean, on the flip side of that, it's Brett saying, I'm excellent, and Mr. Perfect saying, well, you're not perfect. But that's all you really needed with the two of these guys.
Right, with the two of these guys. And this especially is where the IC belt kind of became the work rate belt for a long time.
Yeah, it definitely became the belt that would propel somebody into the main event picture.
Yeah, honestly, I think this match did a ton for this title.
Oh, 100%. It also, like I was saying, made it so that if you had this belt, you went up to the main event at some point, but it was also the guys who had this belt and wanted this belt worked a little bit harder because they knew they would go up at some point.
Right. Previous to this, I think the belt was a bit of a glass ceiling where, all right, you got to the IC belt. That's about all you're ever getting to in the company.
Right. You had guys like Honky Tonk Man,
right,
who had the belt for how long and didn't do anything after that.
Exactly.
So it's definitely interesting to see how this changed that belt.
Yeah, this match is definitely one of those that in the history of the sport or the whatever of the pantheon of professional wrestling, this is top 10, if not top 10, at least top 25.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
But I would certainly argue top 10 probably.
If you have the WWE Network or can get a hold of it, watch this match.
Yeah, definitely by far something that needs to be watched.
This should be a standard for the future title matches that are showing up.
Yeah, this should be your benchmark. All right. Up next, the opposite of all of that. Up next we had the Bushwhackers versus the Natural Disasters, being Earthquake and Typhoon.
Bushwhackers came out with Andre the Giant. Little backstory to that is that the Natural Disasters, I believe it was Earthquake.
Earthquake, yeah.
What he was going to team with Andre.
Yeah, they were trying to recruit Andre.
And Jimmy Hart was going to be Andre's manager, and they were trying to recruit him. Andre ended up saying no, so Earthquake attacked him.
Yep. Took out his knee was the storyline reason given. In reality, much sadder.
Yeah.
So Andre comes out, but he's on crutches. But it was because of his health conditions. He was on the decline, unfortunately, at this point.
Yeah, this was to the point where his body was just starting to fail him. You weren't going to see him taking.
He couldn't take bumps. He couldn't.
Yeah.
He couldn't walk under his own power without crutches. The match was nothing special at all. Honestly, It was just kind of a placeholder for the Natural Disasters to get some heat on them.
Yeah.
Which, in that regard, it was perfectly serviceable and effective.
And it worked because at this point, they were trying to go after Andre once or twice, and he would hold up his crutches and try to fend him off until one of the Bushwhackers came out and got in the way, and then...
Yeah, so, I mean, it portrayed these two giant dudes, Earthquake and Typhoon, really as giant bullies and kind of ruthless that they're trying to really injure this beloved star.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of going back to the term work rate, this was not one of those matches. This was a match where it was at best.
Yeah.
But it progressed a story.
Right, exactly. So if you're trying to give it a number of stars, not many, but in the broader context of what are we doing with these characters, the Bushwhackers were always going to be over. They're your token, lovable, adorable, but not good wrestlers.
Right.
The fans love them, but they never needed to win for the fans to love them. Natural Disasters got a bunch of heat and would eventually go on to win the tag belts. So mission accomplished.
Yeah. Yeah, and this was, again, they told a good story in the ring because you have guys like Earthquake who are going through and they would hit a move on one of the Bushwhackers' backs. And then progressively throughout the match, every other move was targeted towards the back of the match or the back of one of the bushwhackers.
Yeah.
So they had the good psychology thing working, and they told a
Right,
good
so-
story. It's just
They don't have the most robust toolbox, but the tools they have, they're very proficient with.
right. They work really well.
Yeah. So
Towards the end of the match, like we're saying, the natural disasters come out to try to attack Andre, and LOD comes out, Legion of Doom, to kind of get in the way. And no, you're not going to hurt our friend.
You're not going to beat up on this icon of the business. It's like if someone's looking for a fight, we'll step up to a fight. Why do you got to go picking on someone else for a fight? We're right here.
Right. And this kind of set up a feud that we'll talk about later on because it has to do with a match with Legion of Doom later on in the night.
Yep. So, all right, that's the third match of the night. Let's see what we got up next here.
Next, we have Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, versus Virgil for
The $1 Million belt.
So, what could I say with this match other than the fact that it was the only time the $1 Million belt actually changed hands in a match?
So let me say this, because this match was more kind of down my alley, where you had two amazing characters. And so this is 1991. This is essentially paying off an angle that was started in 1988. That was the first time $1 Million Man and Virgil appeared together.
Good grief.
So Virgil had been his servant for 3 years at this point. Always had been kind of abused. Always like, if there was ever a time where the heels needed to take a powder, but the faces still need to get their hands on someone, Virgil would be the guy that they got their hands on. He'd take the beating for the $1 Million Man. 3 years was enough of that. They finally come to blows. They originally had a match at WrestleMania of this year, which I believe Virgil won, and it was for the $1 Million title, but he lost by a countout, I believe, so he didn't get the belt.
So wrestling rules, title doesn't change hands unless it's a pinfall or submission.
Right. So kind of a hollow victory for Virgil at that point. So feud continues through the summer to SummerSlam, and the crowd was hot for this.
They were very, very behind Virgil. It was kind of surprising, to be honest.
I mean, honestly, it's the same basic storyline as Stone Cold versus Vince.
Yeah. Your blue-collar guy doesn't like what his boss is doing and is fed up with it.
Yeah, it's, hey, this guy I'm working for doesn't treat me well, and I'm sick of it.
Yeah, and Piper was his same old character throughout this.
Piper had been involved in this angle a little bit. He was actually coaching Virgil to try to teach him some stuff. Great line by Heenan on commentary was Ted DiBiase taught Virgil everything he knows, but he didn't teach Virgil everything that he knows. So
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. I mean, the one thing I will say about Piper and Heenan throughout this entire show, their chemistry was so good.
yeah,
And it kind of came ahead in this match.
they kept feeding into each other very well. And Heenan, the nickname of the Weasel fit him perfectly when Piper would try to call him out on a scumbag comment he would make, and he would kind of weasel out of taking any bad heat for it.
Especially when Piper's calling him
Boobs the entire
boobs
night.
and Booby the Boob Heenan. Everything about this match it made it more fun.
Yeah, and let's say, to your point, was it a great worked match?
No,
not really. But the crowd was on fire for it.
they ate it up.
They loved it. It was
I guess it did what it was supposed to do.
right. It was possibly the perfect Brett match. Was definitely better. The crowd may have been hotter for this one, though.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. The only time the crowd picked up during the Perfect and Brett match was when the title actually changed hands.
Yeah, kind of going into the finish there. And I don't think that crowd realized what they had in that one, in the Brett Perfect match. But it held up through history well, so I'll take that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think this just goes back to my point of WWE being more of a character-driven promotion instead of a work rate promotion.
For sure. They should never try to have 5, 6, 7-star matches every night, but they don't need to, and they can throw out a 5-star match when they have to.
They can sneak those matches in there when they don't try too hard. Like, don't overexpose your strong talents together. Let it be special when they get in the ring together.
And you can always tell when they're doing that at times, and when it is just kind of an organic thing.
Right.
It's definitely better when it's organic.
It is. And you don't want to burn out those guys working together. It's like, as much as they may enjoy working together, you are going to kind of end up with the same routines throughout parts of the matches where they just kind of go into autopilot because it's so
familiar.
Yeah.
No matter what, if you have 2 guys or 2 girls working with each other and they do it all the time, because you got to remember they're also doing the house shows and things like that.
Yeah, it's not just on Raw that this is happening.
They're going to hit a plateau at some point. And if you have them start off on a Raw, and then for the month before the pay-per-view leads up, they have 25, 30 matches, including the live shows, that pay-per-view match is going to suffer a little bit.
Yeah, it'll be better in some regards because they'll have worked out some kinks, but they'll also be routine, and it's going to lack something.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Let's take a quick pause. We have a message from some of our friends here real quick, and we will be right back with the second half of SummerSlam 91.
Hey guys, this is Jamie.
And this is Steve-O.
And we are the hosts of Missing the Mark Wrestling Podcast.
Hashtag your new favorite wrestling podcast.
We are a wrestling podcast for wrestling fans by wrestling fans.
And you can find us anywhere you can find your podcast, so check us on out.
Every 2 weeks, you're going to get a brand new episode from us, anywhere from WWE pay-per-view coverage, what's going on in the state of professional wrestling, as well as interviews with superstars such as former WWE superstar Colin Delaney.
And the review shows can get a little bit heated sometimes, but it's all in good fun. And we want you to join in on the fun.
So please subscribe, listen, download. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at @MissingTheMark_, as well as on Facebook, Missing the Mark Wrestling Podcast. And I don't think you'll regret it.
The most must-listen-to wrestling podcast out there.
All right. Thank you guys for checking us out, and we'll see you down the road.
SummerSlam 91, Part 2.
All right, we are back with the second half of SummerSlam 1991.
I'd like to make a quick mention. One thing that we forgot to talk about. That Andre the Giant with the Bushwhackers versus the Natural Disasters.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually the last time that Andre appeared on WWE
right, yeah,
or WWF television.
Yeah, he would go on to play a goodwill ambassador at like some house shows, especially on European tours. He would make appearances, but nothing else televised, unfortunately, due to his declining health before he passed away.
Yep, he ended up doing this pay-per-view. Had again those live shows. He had one interview in WCW, which is kind of surprising. I'm going to try to find that to watch it.
I don't even honestly remember. Was it anything to do with Paul Wright coming in?
Nope. It was long before that.
All right.
It was just a random thing that he had been out of WWF because of his declining health, was kind of in between things at the time, and was going to be in WCW, but he couldn't muster anything because of his declining health.
I'm honestly not sure I want to see that.
Yeah, it might be a little hard to watch.
Yeah.
Then on top of that, he ended up going to All Japan Pro Wrestling for like a couple of months, maybe. Then he ended up staying in France and ended up passing away at home. Just thought we'd mention that before we got too far away from the match.
At least worth noting that was his final appearance. So, all right, the next match we had up was, our friend the Jailhouse match was the Mountie, Jacques Rougeau versus Big Boss Man.
This was not good.
It was a filler match. They knew that they had something with $1 Million Man and Virgil, and this just gave the crowd a minute to breathe.
This was the hey, I'm going to run and get another beer, or I'm going to step out to the bathroom quick.
Yeah. The match wasn't great. The Mountie, Jacques Rougeau isn't awful. Bossman is usually serviceable as a big man.
He's not the most athletic big man. He's not going to pull a Bam Bam Bigelow and do a moonsault off the top
No.
rope, but he's quick,
He's
I guess.
serviceable.
Yeah.
But it's weird when you have a big man as the face and the little technical guy as the heel. It becomes a little weird.
Yeah. The one thing I will say is that the Mountie's best parts in this whole match were after the match when he lost
Yeah.
and was in the jailhouse and he was fighting off NYPD. That was by far the
When
best
he got
part.
hauled off to jail, it was pretty hilarious just because he does the typical cowardly heel. So at the beginning of the night, he's taunting NYPD in
Yep.
little skits throughout the back. And then after he's we go to the Mountie a number of times through the course of the evening after the match where we see him being taken to jail. We see him being processed into jail. We see him being thrown actually into a holding cell.
And it's just funny hearing him in his Canadian accent yelling, "No, you can't do that. Don't touch my fingers. Don't fingerprint me." It was just funny.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good payoff for the angle. Overall, not a great match. The characters, it was even weird because you have two
Essentially, two
you-
cops.
Yeah, you have two people portraying I am the law. You're kind of doing both sides of the gimmick at the same time. It doesn't mesh well because Boss Man was a correctional officer, but he never really tried to uphold the law type thing. It was always used more of as I'm a bully and I'm abusing my privilege.
Which was what he was much better at.
Yeah, he's always better as a heel in that role. Yeah, the match never really clicked. It was filler. The characters didn't mesh well.
No,
Because-
not as well as they should have.
If you were going to do it, Boss Man needed to take a stronger moral stance against what the Mountie was doing, and he didn't.
Yeah, exactly. The part that kind of killed me was when they were showing the last week or 2 weeks ago, showing the lead up, and they show the Mountie with his nightstick and
His taser.
Well, they originally say it's a nightstick, and
Oh.
Big Boss Man has his billy club, and they go to fight each other, and the Mountie sticks him with a taser, and they play the off of the loudspeakers in the arena,
Yeah.
and lights kind of flicker a little bit,
Yeah, who knew that when you have a cattle prod, it's a cattle prod. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yes,
Who knew that when you have a cattle prod, it's actually tied into the PA system and the lighting rigs in the arena?
it was awful. I'm sitting at my desk watching this while I'm doing stuff at work, and I had to pause to physically watch this, and then I started laughing out loud to the point where people are turning and looking at me.
Yeah, it sticks out a lot, and it's not great, and it's way too comical for how serious it's supposed to be.
But hey, it's the 90s.
It is officially the 90s. All right, moving on.
So next match we have is the Nasty Boys versus Legion of Doom for the WWF Tag Team titles, with the Nasty Boys being the champs at the time.
Yep, in a no DQ match. So the only thing I really have to say about this match was not even about the match. It was the promos before from the Nasty Boys. They said the same exact damn promo, nearly word for word, at least introductions. It was, so let me tell you something.
And then almost the next two lines after that were essentially the same thing, except they were coming from two different guys.
Yeah, it's like they weren't listening to each other. They were too focused in on delivering the promo that obviously this was the early 90s. We weren't into scripted TV yet. They didn't have writers, but they were both just individually focused on delivering their promo that they came up with in their heads, that they didn't listen to the other guy, and they didn't play off each other, and just basically both said the same exact thing verbatim.
Yeah, it was a little awkward afterwards, because then I believe it was Mean Gene was like, okay, well, let's go back to the ring.
Yeah, it was just weird, but anyways, you have Nasty Boys, our champs, versus the Legion of Doom.
Overall, a good tag match. I thought it was pretty decent.
They think you're a little bit more charitable on this one than I am, but it wasn't awful. It wasn't amazing.
Yeah, compared to some of the other stuff that we had in the night, I mean, it was definitely better than...
I will say Legion of Doom, very, very over. So there was that.
I feel like they always were.
Yeah,
And
they especially around this time, they definitely had like a certain mystique built up. So the match was made better by how much the Legion of Doom brought the crowd to the match. So
Yeah. And this is kind of where we were talking about earlier with the natural disasters, that it kind of starts up the next part of a story.
right, so it dovetailed the two stories very nicely together.
Legion of Doom ends up winning, and they get the tag belts.
So then they are able to pick up with the natural disasters who, hey, even before we had the tag belts, a little bit of friction there created.
Right. So it ends up pushing the two stories on very well. It merges them very well and pushes it forward even better.
So some good storytelling there. All right, next match up was IRS versus Greg the Hammer Valentine.
IRS, known as Dad Wyatt or Dad Dallas.
Yep. Erwin R. Shyster. This would be before he ends up teaming up with Million Dollar Man. So again, this was a filler match.
It was the worst filler match.
I honestly fell asleep watching this match and didn't wake up until the next match.
Yeah, it wasn't good. There wasn't anything of note other than IRS rolling up Greg Valentine.
About all I can really say was IRS was definitely hated as a heel.
Yeah.
So you had your hated heel. Greg Valentine didn't really have a character.
No, but people liked him. They cheered him when he came out.
Which was he kind of was doing like a Ric Flair gimmick where, look at me, I have a sparkly robe.
Yeah, and he even used the figure four.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure stopped because this was right around the time Flair was coming into WWF the first time.
We should mention that earlier in the night there was that promo where randomly in the middle of a match, Bobby Heenan got up and ran to the back. And then there was a backstage segment where we cut to the back and we see Heenan pounding on a door that says Hogan on it.
And Heenan's yelling and screaming for Hogan to open the door because he's going to issue him a match for the real championship, the real world title.
Right. So
and he's holding
the WCW big gold belt,
which I had to rewind it because I saw it and I'm like, what the hell?
This was a very interesting point in history where the WCW champion, or formerly the NWA champion, would pay a deposit on the belt so they didn't run off with it. And Flair, at the time, was the owner of the NWA/WCW title, did not get along with Jim Herd, who was the booker for WCW, and left the company. Well, they never gave him the deposit for the belt back, so he never gave the belt back.
Yep, he kept the belt, and apparently to this day he still has the original belt.
Yeah. So he just took the belt and went to WWF, and they started a cool angle where it was Ric Flair claiming he was the real world champion against Hulk Hogan. And then, as Bobby would say, that Hogan kept dodging him.
Yeah, and by dodging him, Bobby was trying to challenge for Ric Flair, and Hogan just kept slamming the door on his face.
Yeah. Oddly enough, the angle never really went anywhere.
No, because from what I remember, shortly after NWA, WCW sued Flair, they ended up getting the belt back and gave him his $25,000 back.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the end of the real champion bit.
Right. That didn't go anywhere. They never had a Hogan-Flair one-on-one match. Flair would go on to become WWF champion, but by winning, we'll get to all that eventually, I'm sure. But
yeah, there was a couple singles matches involved. There was a Royal Rumble match involved to pay off the storyline. We'll get there.
It was just very odd that their paths would never actually cross when this was like the build-up to it right off the bat.
Right.
So, all right.
So
after our filler match,
we end up having the quote-unquote main event match.
Well, SummerSlam was plugged as the match made in heaven and the match made in hell. So first up was our match made in hell.
And this was the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan, who was a WWF champion at the time, against Sergeant Slaughter, General Adnan,
Yep.
and Colonel Mustafa, a.k.a. the Iron Sheik.
So again, you did this last week, and now you're doing it again. You can't just go around saying two people are the same person. Colonel Mustafa is one person. Iron Sheik is a completely different person.
No, they're the same guy. It's just like Sami Zayn and El Generico. They're the same person.
Wow. Like, you can't just go around calling people other people. That's not okay. You can't prove that.
Who else would have such a comical mustache the exact same way?
Every villain from the 1930s. Do you think the vaudevillains were in that match too?
They might as well have been. Listen. Here's a picture of both of them. Two different get-ups, the same guy.
That's Photoshop.
You're literally the worst. Anyway, before I start throwing things at you, this ended up being our match made in hell. It was a 3-on-2 handicap match.
Oh, Sid Justice as the referee.
Yeah, before he turned psycho. See
Yep.
what I did there?
Yeah.
See what I did there?
Apparently it was not softball season.
Nope. So they ended up going through, and there's a couple of backstage segments where Sid is shown talking to what did Sergeant Slaughter call themselves?
I want to say it was like the axis of something, but
It was something weird like that.
yeah, they had some sort of, look at us, we're evil and we're part of this Iraqi dictatorship thing.
Yeah. So everybody, namely Bobby the Brain, is saying over and over again, Sid's going to be a bad guy and he's going to side with Slaughter, Mustafa, and Adnan.
Yep.
But Sid keeps saying over and over again to Mean Gene and a couple other backstage people, I never shook their hands. I never made a deal. Nothing ever happened.
Yeah, I'm going to call it right down the middle.
Overall,
It wasn't great. So this match was precipitated by some backstage issues. If you go back to our first episode, we actually talked about it just a little bit.
oh yeah, this was the stuff with Warrior.
Yeah, a week before SummerSlam, Ultimate Warrior essentially held up Vince McMahon for $500,000. Warrior claimed that Vince owed him $500,000 for his WrestleMania payoff. The two still never really ever agreed on what the story was, as far as at least I ever know publicly. So yeah, there was some bad feelings going on here in the match.
And you can even kind of tell at a point later on in the match, right before the finish is about to happen, Warrior grabs a chair. And it's the funniest thing ever because he doesn't hold it at the bottom by the legs. He holds it in the middle, like in the middle by where the seat is.
Yeah.
With the top of the chair facing Adnan and Mustafa, and chases them out of the ring.
Yeah.
And out of the arena. And Bobby's like, where did Warrior go? What happened to him? Where'd he run off to?
Yeah, so Warrior just kind of disappears into a plot hole, for lack of a better word, for a couple of months. Because he doesn't show up again until Mania. Even weirder than that was the actual finish. So Warrior has a chair, and he's chasing off Adnan and Mustafa to the back. The camera cuts back into the ring. Hulk Hogan, our hero of our tale, has a handful of random powder that he throws into Sergeant Slaughter's face for the 3.
And you have Bobby and pretty much all 3 of the commentators all sorts of confused about, where did this powder come from? What is this? Why did he throw it at him?
Which were all great questions that we never get answers to.
I'm sitting here watching all of this happen, and I'm like, oh, it's 90s wrestling. I guess it makes sense.
No, it doesn't. It didn't make any sense, let me assure you. Nothing like this happened back then.
I guess I didn't understand why the good guy needed to use the underhanded tactics to beat the traitorous villain.
Right. It didn't make any sense that, hey, out of nowhere, let me get a handful of baby powder and smack it in your face.
But the even better part is, where did it come from? Like, did Hogan pull it out of his shorts?
Did someone hand it to him? Yeah, we don't know.
I mean, it's not like he walked over to a table and pulled a LeBron James and threw the powder up in the air. He just shows up with it.
Right. Maybe Slaughter had it and he took it from him and turned the tables on him, but that's not what the camera showed at all.
No, there was never a thing that showed how Hogan ended up getting it or what ended up leading to that.
Right. It essentially just looked like suddenly Hogan is the heel in the match and we're cheating to win.
Out of nowhere, he just pops up with a powder and the brain goes, "Where did he get that powder? What is that?" And Piper goes, "It's magic powder."
Yeah, which it essentially was. For all intents and purposes, that was magic powder.
I don't know.
All right.
I guess,
So, and showing how magical this powder is, after this match is when Slaughter would do his whole "I want my country back" tour around classroom backstage vignettes that was overly sappy and saccharine, but it ended the storyline at least.
it's like you said, what's a little treason between friends?
Right. Why not? You know, I was a huge Iraqi sympathizer, and, you know, not so much anymore. Why not?
During the Cold War, not the Cold War, the
Persian Gulf War.
Persian Gulf, out of all things.
Yeah, I mean, Slaughter had nuclear, death threats heat.
Yeah, it finished the story. That's what it needed to do.
It wrapped up the storyline, and we actually got closure to that storyline, which was all fine and well.
And
but
it kept Hogan from being in a singles title match.
yeah, at SummerSlam. So, all right, we go from our match made in hell to our match made in heaven.
Which ended up being, almost the last 15 minutes
It was the last 15, 20 minutes, yeah.
And it ends up being, again, the match made in heaven, the wedding of Miss Elizabeth and Macho Man.
Miss Elizabeth,
Miss Elizabeth, as
Macho would
Machos-
say, yeah.
as they replayed the proposal where he's saying, Elizabeth, over and over again.
Yeah,
Instead of actually...
it was a little rough, but so when I first saw that the last 18 minutes were devoted, so let me actually reframe this a little bit more. The last 20 minutes, the entire main event slot of their second biggest pay-per-view of the year, when they only had 4 pay-per-views per year, was devoted to a wedding where nothing happened. No shenanigans, just 2 people getting married.
Yeah, there was nothing. Like, they even took the ropes and the posts off of the ring for this.
Yeah, it was just kind of a raised platform. So it seems really weird to do that until you think about the context. This was actually the payoff for the angle that started in 1985 when Macho came to the WWF.
Yeah, I mean,
It was
6 years in the making.
It was 6 years of these characters going through their ups and downs, through Macho Man going through 2 heel phases, through Miss Elizabeth. Is she with Hogan? Is she with Savage? Who is she behind? Macho Man's career ending at the previous WrestleMania by Ultimate Warrior.
Wasn't this all leading up to, or who's she behind Hogan?
This
Savage?
this was after that.
Right, but this kind of, or wasn't that around the time with the Mega Powers and things
Yep,
like that?
yep. So
you had all of this stuff happening, and it took 6 years to
yeah, you
hit
have
the
6
end
years
point.
of character development. The reason this was the main event was because that's how invested the fans were in these characters.
And it's kind of funny to note that they talked about Jake the Snake Roberts and The Undertaker showing up to do something in the middle of the marriage. It was almost a precursor to the DDP Stalker angle that we talked about last week.
A little bit of foreshadowing there, because it was a little bit weird because the angle was never originally intended to be Undertaker and Jake versus Macho, which it ended up being. It was supposed to be Ultimate Warrior versus those two, but
he just chased two Iraqi sympathizers out of the arena
and fell into a plot hole.
Yeah,
as you do. Yeah, and when you hold the boss up for $500,000, it turns out you disappear.
which kind of makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, so
But it's just funny to see that back then you could have the main event angle being something that long and
right, you could have
nothing come of it.
Yeah, you could legitimately just have a sincere moment for fans to kind of have a little bit of catharsis where
And mind you, this is 1991. In real life, they had been married for what, like 5 years,
longer
6
than,
years?
they were married in 1983. They were divorced in 92. So they were closer to the end of their marriage than the beginning.
Right. So it's just funny to see. I mean, we had little things like this afterwards. Like you had Kane trying to marry Lita.
Yeah,
You
so
had-
like every wedding since this has always been shenanigans.
Right. You had Tess trying to marry Steph McMahon.
Yeah.
You had that stupid sex thing with Edge and Lita being in the main event.
You had the awful wedding between Billy and Chuck.
Yeah. So I guess this kind of set a precedent for it, but nothing after that ended up coming.
Nothing else was ever just done as a genuine moment for
Right.
the fans. Like,
And
everything else was always played up as an angle to get to the next thing, to get to the next thing, to get to the next thing. This was actually an ending.
and the fans ate it up.
Yeah.
They were all about it. Like
It was.
they showed a couple of people because they advertised this being like the wedding of the century.
Yeah.
They showed people who were in like suits and tuxes in
Yeah. And-
in the crowd.
People in the crowd were tearing up over how lovely it was and how happy they were for these two people.
So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yay story writing.
You'd never see it today, and looking at it through a lens of today, it seems very weird and hokey, and it's easy to be jaded looking at it and going, what is you gave this the main event slot in 20 minutes on a wrestling show? What?
Especially the second biggest of the year.
Yeah, but it was a legitimate moment.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the closest thing you have now that something similar is happening is Alexa and Braun on the Mixed Match Challenge, which
honestly, I think the closest you have of getting legitimate emotions from the fan is Ciampa Gargano.
oh yeah,
Different emotions, certainly,
very different.
but it's the closest thing to sincerity they have, and the closer they get to sincerity, the better they are.
Yeah, and kind of playing off of them going back to them being closer to the end of their marriage, the first time that an outside relationship of any kind was referenced was I did a little digging, and they actually had a interview in the WWF magazine with Macho after they had been divorced.
Oh,
And he had said that they weren't together anymore, and it gave a little bit of detail about it, but there wasn't much.
right.
Apparently, people thought that like this whole crazy stuff started stemming from it. Like Macho cheated on Miss Elizabeth. Miss Elizabeth cheated on Macho. They were both getting nasty letters written to him and all this stuff. And it was the first time in this kind of era that outside lives were portrayed and
Yeah, ever even mentioned kind of
Right.
on screen.
and it just is interesting now to go from that where it's an article in a magazine to
The internet dirt sheets, that's just,
internet dirt sheets and social media and everything.
yeah, everything's
where
everywhere. Yeah.
I can literally jump on Instagram and see what AJ Styles is eating for dinner if he posts it.
Right. So, all right. Anyways, that was SummerSlam from August 26th, 1991. I thought it was honestly really pretty good from a character standpoint. In-ring action, a couple solid matches, one amazing match, but
And quite a few duds.
yeah,
but
a couple
again-
yeah, a lot of honestly, about every other match was filler. Every other match at least got some characters work in there. So,
Right. And again, WWF isn't a work rate company.
yeah.
So
Honestly, this is the kind of thing where I think they would love to have an event like this in the current day.
oh yeah, it's a good way to progress the story towards WrestleMania. It's a good way to to kind of send fans home happy.
Yeah, it had something for everyone in there too. If you like solid matches, had one of the best matches of all time.
If you liked the goofy, corny stuff, you had the Bushwhackers on there.
Yeah, it had something for everyone. It got stuff done. Good show overall.
Better than some of the stuff they're putting on recently.
Sure. All right, let's wrap this up. All right, so that about wraps it up here for this week in wrestling history for the week of August 22nd through August 28th. That was SummerSlam 1991.
Yep. Overall, again, good pay-per-view. And like we said before, guys, let us know if you liked what we did the first 2 episodes. Let us know if you like what we did last episode, or let us know if you like what we did this episode. We can try to mix and match things.
Yeah, or any other suggestions you got for us, let us know. Quick little note of bookkeeping. Apparently in episode 2, I completely confused Robert Gibson of the Rock and Roll Express with James Gibson, better known as Jamie Noble, in a ROH match. So my bad. Thanks to our astute listener, Dan, for catching that one.
I mean, that happens.
Yeah, we're watching a lot of stuff every week, so
Yeah.
There might be some mistakes. So we appreciate everyone listening and letting us know when we do miss something.
Yeah, for sure. And remember, guys, Facebook page, This Week in Wrestling History. If you want to send us any suggestions or reach out to us, what's the email again?
Email address is wrestlinghistorypodcast@gmail.com.
Spotify, Google Play. We kind of got iTunes figured out if you go look at our Facebook
Yeah,
post.
if you check out the Facebook page, you can manually subscribe. We go through all the steps there. It's pretty easy, actually. I did it myself on my iPhone. Put the directions up for everyone else. If you like the show, please feel free to share it. We definitely appreciate it. I think that's everything. You got anything else?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. We're history.